My guest today is Andy Paul. Andy is the host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, formerly known as Accelerate Your Sales. He's also written 2 award-winning sales books, Zero Time Selling and Amp Up Your Sales. He has a 3rd book that's about to be released called Sell Without Selling Out, which we get into in today's episode. Furthermore, Andy has ranked number 8 on LinkedIn's list of top 50 global sales experts, and he's consulted some of the biggest companies on planet Earth. Those companies include Square, Philips, Grubhub, and many, many more. He is one of the leading voices in the sales industry today, and his thoughts and takes on the SaaS industry specifically were quite interesting. I really enjoyed this conversation. I took a lot of lessons myself out of our discussion. Andy shared some great stories and some great insights and tips into how to be the best seller you can be. And not only do I recommend you check out his show, but take a look at his books as well. And I hope you'll connect with him and follow him on LinkedIn. He puts out some fantastic content that I know I look forward to every single day. So without further ado, here's Andy. Hey, Andy, welcome to the show.
Jesse, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I was just telling you off air that I'm a big fan and consumer of your content. So when we got connected, I was over the moon that we're going to have a chance to talk today. So I think a great place to start is tell us how you got into sales in the first place. And I was looking at your LinkedIn profile this morning and noticed that you have a degree in history from Stanford. So why are you not a tenured professor at one of the Ivy League colleges? And why are you down here in the trenches with us sellers?
Because I wasn't smart enough to do the other.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's funny, I was interviewing for my first job out of school in sales, and the guy that eventually hired me, or the boss of the guy who eventually hired me, he was really hard to convince that he should, take the chance on me, because he had presumed that everybody from Stanford went on to become a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, or a professor. And I was like, no, I always wanted to go into business. And he's like, well, but we only hire people out of undergraduate business degrees. I'm like, yeah, but I think I can do this. So that's sort of my first sales job, if you will, is on him. To our first sales effort is to convince him that it's worth taking a chance on me.
Nice. I imagine that having a degree in history, you learned how to write, you learned how to argue for a specific stance. Or make a case for something, which is, I think, pretty critical in sales, is being able to posture yourself and position your message. Are there anything else, or is there any other skills that you picked up from your undergraduate degree that you think are applicable to sales? Excuse me.
Well, I think that I went into history probably because I love to read, very curious, sort of insatiably curious, and that really fed that, right? So I was just. It just seemed like a topic where I come in and just loved reading, learning things, learning about other cultures, and so it just sort of seemed to be a natural. And I wasn't coming up high school. I wasn't very good at math, or compared to the really brilliant people that were at Stanford in that pursuit. So liberal arts sort of seemed to be my thing.
Yeah. I've always said, one of the most critical skills in sales is curiosity. And I think it's really underrated, Not a lot of people think about that as being a critical, business skill, sales skill. But I think it's one of the things when people directly ask me, hey, why do you think you're so good at what you do? Or how do you, what is it that led you to this career that you have now? And I always boil it down to, I'm really curious. And if you can get really curious about how a business works and functions and what problems they have and how you might solve the problems and how you might help the people that are trying to solve those problems, that's when you really start to have that formula for consistency and success and so forth.
I agree 100%. Yeah. In fact, I've mentioned before we went on there, I have a new book coming out, and we'll be announcing here shortly. And it's built around this idea that there are really only 4, in my belief, after all the work I've done over the decades in sales and working with thousands of sellers, and is that there's really 4 core attributes you need to be consistently successful in sales. And that is, just, in order, is connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. If you can develop your ability to connect with someone at a human level, to build the trust and credibility, bring your curiosity to bear, to really dig in and understand what's most important to the person you're talking to with, truly understand that, bring your understanding to bear, so you understand, how can you really help them get that thing that they want that's important to them, and then deploy your generosity to bring them the value they need and the vision they need to see, oh yeah, this is the best alternative for us.
That's great. No, those are awesome. I want to write those down. I love guiding principles, and I've absorbed those from a lot of former managers who were immensely successful. And I think those are a really good, to sum up the four. That's a great summary.
And it's the thing about these is that they, unlike the way most sellers are trained, which is, I like to draw a distinction. I call the way most sellers are trained is to be salesy, right? They sort of call it salesy, right? And behaviors that are learned behaviors that buyers don't find valuable to them. Yeah. And if they're not valuable to the buyers, they're not valuable to you as a seller. So why do we continue to do it? And so the opposite of that is rely on these innately human characteristics, your ability to connect with another person. We're wired to do that. We're wired to be connected. We're wired to be curious and interested in the world around us. We're wired to reach this level of empathy and understanding of another person, to build on this relationship. And we're wired to be generous as a species. And so the things that people say they don't like about sellers, that's not the way we are as people. Right. We learn how to do those things. It's time really to say, look, why don't we go back to what we were naturally built to do? And if we do that, then we'll work with our buyers in a way that they want and need us to.
I want to dig into that a little bit. It's really interesting. What for a seller like myself, I've been in the business for around a decade at this point.
Sure.
And even for someone with less experience, maybe they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years into their selling career, what are some ways that I could exercise that muscle and improve my ability there in terms of the human connection side of things, and focusing on that as opposed to sort of the more traditional selling frameworks and best practices and do this and metrics and that? Like, what are some ways that I can implement today to help me build that muscle?
Well, think about what your perspective is when you, as a seller, when you think about what your job is. So if you're a seller and you think that your job consists of going out and talking to a buyer and persuading them to buy your product, you're going to take one set of actions. If you believe your job is to go out and connect with the buyer and really listen to understand what's the most important thing to them, right? From a challenge standpoint, from a desired outcome standpoint, and then help them get that, then you're going to take a different set of actions. You're going to have a different mindset of what your job is. And this is the second one, is the job that is the real job of sales. Our job is not to persuade somebody to buy something. It's to help somebody understand what their problem is, how they might potentially solve it. And then, oh yeah, we might be the right company to help you do that.
Right. No, that's great. That's super interesting. So going back to your first sales role, what was that like? How did you know that from that point on you were, or did you know at that point that you were going to stay in that profession for the, basically duration of your career up to this point?
Well, I knew after a couple of months, so I was going to work for, at that time, it was the second largest computer company in the world, a company called Burroughs. And we were selling accounting computer systems to small, mid-sized businesses. And so these were not quite mainframe size, but they were, by today's standards, pretty large pieces of equipment with a full set of accounting applications, everything in the general ledger. And so, yeah, my job was I worked I was based in Oakland in the East Bay area, San Francisco Bay Area. And yeah, I was out every day in the field making cold calls. Wow. And I'd find a local business park and park my car and, troll door to door throughout business parks, trying to uncover prospects. And so it was a great education in the sense that yeah, I had this opportunity to talk to these CEOs, these business founders, and deploy my curiosity to learn from them about business. You know, my customers basically taught me how to sell to them, because
Wow.
I was, and you know, I never reached this point where they thought, well, that's a stupid question, because they knew I was sincere in my interest to learn about the business and sincere in my interest to see if there's a way I could help them. And yeah, just sitting there being curious was such a great education. So for me, in terms of just understanding business and developing my own business acumen and learning through the experiences of these entrepreneurs that were successful, it was fantastic. Now, I almost didn't get to that point though, because 2 weeks after I've been in the office for 2 weeks, they sent us away to sales training class. So the sort of a national training center we all went to. And at the end of those 2 weeks, they send you back to your office with a sealed envelope from the instructor. And at that time, these companies, tech companies of that generation, hired hundreds and thousands of new grads every year.
Wow.
With the express intent of weeding them out.
I imagine very competitive.
Yeah. And so when I come back from that first training class, I hand the assessment to the evaluation to my big boss, and he goes in his office and he reads it. And we're all sitting in a bullpen, a sales floor, open architecture, and he comes in and points at me and says, "Hey, come to my office." I said, "Sure." And I get to his office and he's reading the evaluation, and I can't really see what's happening. So he asked me, he said, "So how do you think training went?" And I thought, oh, trap question. I said, "I thought it went well." He said, "Well, that's interesting." He said, "Because Jim, my instructor, Jim thinks we should fire you."
Oh, man.
He thinks you're too analytical and you'll never be a good salesperson. Now think about that. That was their frame of reference. Was if you weren't the "hey, how you doing" type,
extrovert,
salesy person, you just weren't, you didn't have sales DNA in their mind, which was just insane, because some of the best sellers I ever met in my life were in that company. But this is how they were training people. And so his recommendation was, get rid of this guy. Fortunately, they didn't. And, one thing led to another, and here I am. But you just think about sort of the stereotypes people have.
That's been one of my most surprising conclusions, being in the industry as long as I have at this point, that some of the best sellers that I've worked alongside are not, they were not the high school football quarterback. they were maybe the artist or the piano player, or something like that, maybe the drama club lead or something. But for the most part, I've been very surprised, and I've been fortunate to interview several very top, very elite performing SaaS reps on the show.
Yeah. My friend Brandon.
He is the exact example that came into mind. Is he's a writer, he's an artist, he's into music, and he's very introverted overall. And he admits that loud and proud, and he's one of the best performing sellers in the industry. So I think it's so interesting. And I'm glad to see that. I think anyway, that the industry is starting to evolve past the point of we only hire, the extroverted personality, the high school, college athlete persona. I think every sales team should have a healthy dose of those individuals as well. But I'm glad to hear that you made the cut, and that you're given that second chance to prove that, analytical ability is very important, especially in large enterprise sales, especially in tech sales. So that's a great story. Were you involved in the post-sale aspects of, because I'm imagining, these big on-premise implementations and things like that. Were you involved in any of the post-sale activities, or was it all just, closing the big deals and walking away and letting the engineers take care of that part of it?
At that point in time, it was primarily, letting our version of what then was success, what we called customer service, let this customer service teams take care of it. Because, the technology was more rudimentary, and it wasn't quite as plug and play as it is today. Like doing demonstrations was always an exercise in stress and anxiety, because it wasn't about knowing the product. It was
Will it work?
Will the equipment stay up long enough to do the demo?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of sales leaders that came from, I'll say that era of sales where it was on site, on premise. And yeah, demoing wasn't quite as simple as opening up a browser tab and logging into a demo interface or a sandbox environment. It was very much a demo, kind of like demoing a Tesla or something. It was demoing a piece of hardware. So I love that. It was
different, but you actually used it to my advantage, because one of the things I determined early on at that stage of my career was, I didn't really want to make 40 cold calls a day. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So I sort of relied on a sort of a mix of activities. So I said, well, another guy, my branch, an older guy, had been doing this. And so what I did is I just held seminars in my branch every Wednesday. And what I do is I'd send 10 to 15 postcards. We'd get the business directory or Hoover's directory and write the address and physically send 10 to 15 postcards via mail. And then I would call people relentlessly and follow up. And I thought, gosh, out of those 15, if I could harvest 2 or 3 to come in every week reliably, and I would then demonstrate, I was actually focusing on selling to the construction industry. So I had the software application, job cost accounting, and so on, specifically for the construction business. And I had a nice slick little demo that I came up with. And it was a great way to generate pipeline.
Yeah.
Very reliable. And so the demo actually worked for me, because then I could bring people in, see them face to face. They felt more comfortable being in sort of a group setting, didn't think they were going to be, pitched heavily. And we just have a great discussion about, what their requirements were and how we could help them.
That's great. I was reading a LinkedIn post of yours recently that talked about turning, big failures into success stories. And the specific example you gave was you were at a startup that didn't work out. And I'd love to hear you tell that story. And, it sounds like you turned it around, and after that, you landed somewhere that ended up working out really well for you. But what happened at the startup, and what lessons can we who are in early startups learn from that experience?
Well, this one was a little different in the sense that it basically imploded. I worked a number of startups. In this case, this was sort of the tail end of the era where there are a ton of companies trying to develop next generation personal computers, PCs. Right. And the market basically decided, we don't need more vendors in this space. Was really the bottom line. And so the company had imploded. They started letting people go, and this time my wife and I had just purchased our first home, before that, and I come home on a Friday, I'm out of work. So either that night or the next morning, I was looking through Fortune magazine. I was living in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley at that time, and read this article about this company that was transforming the satellite communications business with these very small sized dishes for data transmission, replacing terrestrial telephone lines. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. So on Monday, I cold called him and managed to, through several phone calls, managed to get an interview with the VP of sales, and went in, I don't know, maybe the next week or something. I can't remember exactly how long the interval was. But as it turned out, the guy I was interviewing with actually was somebody that had offered me a job 4 years before at another company.
Oh, interesting.
That I hadn't taken, just by sheer luck. That he happened to be there. I didn't recognize the name when they said who I was going to be meeting with, and so on. And it was sort of things where we sat down and said, like, wait, we know each other, don't we? I was like, oh yeah, you offered me a job, which was interesting. He had offered me a job with the stipulation that I not take it.
Oh, interesting.
So this was back in the early days of the personal computer business. He has worked for this software company that at the time had developed the alternative operating system to the Apple, on the Apple IIs and IIIs at that time, dating myself here. And And they had a big, he was the VP of sales, and they'd had an offer from IBM or one of the big companies to buy them, and they turned it down. And he says, yeah, I'd love to have you come to work for me, but I'll offer you a job, but don't take it. And by the way, I'm leaving. And so just by sheer luck, literally almost 4 years to the day, I run into him again. And yeah, he turned out to be a wonderful mentor in my career, really taught me how to sell large accounts, and was a fantastic mentor.
That I love that story. I've experienced at least one of those where I've turned, 2019 for me was a really down year, and had a similar experience, and, was able to come back from that. And the last couple of years have been some of the best of my career. So that, I think is a good message out there to sellers is don't throw in the towel just yet. Just because things feel like there's no way out of the dark pit, you will bounce back. If you just keep playing the game. That's really the key, is you've got to keep getting yourself up and playing the game, and you'll get back to where you were.
Well, it's going to happen more than once. And so, my career, I've sort of lost count, but at one time I started counting, the various chapters in my career.
Sure.
That, there was, sort of a dip or, some substantial change that took place. And you look at it as an opportunity to do something different, learn something new, develop a new skill set. I mean, I hadn't podcasted before 2015, and here we are at 1,000 episodes. So had to learn everything I could about podcasting. And my son's been my business partner on this, so we've worked on it together. But
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how to write books. I didn't know how to blog. Didn't know how to build a social following, and we've done all those things. So if you just look at them as opportunities, and for me, at various points in my career, is like when I got that job in the satellite communications business, I had never sold to a major account. And for the year, I was routinely getting 7-figure deals. It just sort of happened that way.
Very interesting. Yeah, great story. Hang in there. I want to ask you, because sure. You've got a great perspective on the industry, on selling, salespeople, and sort of the psychology that surrounds the daily lives of us reps. What are some big facepalm things that you're seeing out there today that reps are doing that you just cringe or want to bang your head against your desk and say, why, or sales managers at that? It doesn't have to be just reps. What are some practices out there that you're seeing that are just facepalm, cringe, smash your head against the desk in frustration at the way that the industry still currently does business?
Well, how much time do we have? We are our own worst enemy. And so you talk about this idea of, sellers, we don't like the perception of us that buyers hold as sort of being uninformed, untrustworthy, pushy, what have you, clueless. And there's studies that have shown CEOs report that 20% of only 20% of their meetings with sellers have any sort of value to offer. I think that was a Forrester or a Gartner study. And why is that? And I think it gets back to this idea I talked about before, is we approach the job with the wrong perspective. If you think your job is to convince somebody to buy your product, that's just the wrong approach.
Bad premise to start out with.
Just to start out with. And so you're going to go down the wrong path. You're going to pitch, you're going to sell before you really understand what the problem is. And buyers get that disconnect. Well, how can you be selling something new? You don't even know what I need. Well, because for most sellers, the answer is, well, you need my product, regardless what your problem is. But if you again approach it with the perspective of, I'm here to listen. I'm here to ask questions and really understand what is the most important thing for you. And then say, okay, how can I help you get that? And that's my job, help you get that thing that's most important to you. And if I do that, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to lead with questions, because I want to understand. And through the questions may help you as a buyer better understand what it is your challenges are, and also help you better understand what you might possibly achieve by meeting them and solving them. That's a whole different approach to it.
Right.
Yet we still
Right.
seem to be focused on training people to do the first. So I'll listen to, recordings of calls, and it's like, yeah, why are you pitching first? Right?
Mhm.
Even if the customer asks you, well, what do you do? I would still say, well,
Before I say that, what do you want?
that, would you be open to me asking you a question?
Yeah.
Just like that. Would you be open to me asking a question? And people always say, well, sure. And so it's just those things.
Mhm.
And there's also this sort of body of people that's, you sort of see more and more. It's like, if you're on LinkedIn, you spend time there, saying,
Right.
this whole thing about connecting with another human being, building some sort of relationship with them. Yeah, you don't want to do that. And it's like, you couldn't be more wrong.
Right. Right.
The people that say this are just flat out wrong, because at the end of the day, people are still buying from you as a person. I mean,
what do you think?
Let's go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. What do you think? Where do you think that notion comes from? That part of sales isn't important. Who, is that from some book or training, or is it just sort of a bad habit?
I don't want to name names, but
Sure.
but I think what people who express that, what they're doing is they're playing to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And for maybe people of your generation and newer cohorts coming to sales, more digital natives, you haven't learned how to make those connections in the same way, right? You're more messaging based. It's more asynchronous. It's not your fault. It's just the way things are, right? But so we have to help people learn these things. Instead of telling them, oh, it's not important, it actually really is important. Yeah. And so, and there's some people would want you to believe that, I think Gartner has a report about millennial decision makers don't want to talk to sellers. Well, first of all, buyers never wanted to talk to a seller. I think
in any generation, right?
In the history of mankind. And so that's not new. But what the buyers are saying is, I really don't have time for you if you can't help me achieve what's most important to me. So if you can't contribute to that, I don't have time for you. And that's perfectly rational.
Yeah.
And so, but that's a pretty low bar, because what you're saying to sellers is, look, you just have to be able to add more value than the content that's available on your website.
You have to add value instead of taking away value. I mean, really, that's the bar, is add something and just not nothing, or don't detract either.
Well, but it has to be more than what the customer can gather on their own.
Right. Right.
If they can gather on their own, they don't need you. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, when someone's making a purchase decision, there's an element of risk associated with it to the company and to the decision maker. Mm-hmm. And the way they validate that is, yes, they can get social proof from review sites and other places. But if you really want to feel more comfortable, you're going to want to talk to somebody. This is why people still go to retail stores, still why the bulk of retail sales are in person. It's because people want that validation. They're making a good decision.
Mm-hmm. The guidance, the perspective. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now the range of products that people are comfortable buying without that has changed over time, and there's more expensive products. Sure. You can buy your Tesla without talking to someone. But yeah, and in the main, people still want to talk to people. And there's been studies done on this, is that it depends on, when things get really critical. And one of the first studies, I think, was, using AI to help people make decisions about medical decisions, about health, is at the end of the day that people still want to talk to the doctors. Mm-hmm. Even though the AI system may have given them better information in an ideal state. Yeah. Reassurance. And this happens in sales. Mm-hmm.
Man, yeah, that is so interesting that there's a voice out there that says that relationships aren't part of selling, or they're not a key part of selling, I should say. What other habits or practices do you see that you just cringe over?
Well, I think it's something back to what we talked about earlier, is people not being curious enough. Mm-hmm. And you have to be committed to being a lifelong continuous learner in sales, really in any profession, but we're talking about sales, is you can't ever get to that point where you think, yeah, I know everything. Because as soon as you do, you start falling behind. Because there's no staying still. There's no staying still in business. There's no staying still in sales. And that, I think, is another behavior it's under your control. And it's never been easier to be exposed to content, whether it's on LinkedIn or online training systems and various other platforms, podcasts. It's like, just consume broadly and widely and expose yourself to a lot of different things and say, well, that sort of makes sense to me. That may work for me. I'm going to go try that. And just keep this experimentation going. And managers, especially managers who are a little insecure, they're not going to be always very comfortable with you experimenting and coloring outside the line. But that is if you were to say, look, I'm going to go do a deep dive on the top sellers, including, let's say, Brandon Fluharty, we talked about, is we're going to do a deep dive on these people. There's one common thing that they all have in common. Sorry, being redundant. But one thing they all have in common is they broke the rules.
Colored outside of the lines, did things a little bit differently.
And managers should be encouraging that, not discouraging it. They should be encouraging everybody to keep learning, to keep experimenting, to become the best version of themselves. I don't want you to be a clone of somebody else. I want you to be the best version of you, because you've got unique strengths, you've got unique capabilities. How do I help you develop these?
That's a really good point. And I wouldn't go as far as calling this a facepalm or a cringe approach to sales, but I do get a lot of outreach that just isn't very human. It's reps not seeking to understand, not infusing in their own personality to the process. And they're, robotic, or even worse, assumptive about what my needs or wants are in my business. And that's where it gets cringy, if you will, is the assumptive, that assumptive approach of, because I've been working
to buy a product.
I've been working at XYZ SaaS company for 6 months, and I now know more about the, DevOps industry than you do, Mr. or Mrs. DevOps buyer. I do see that quite often.
Sure, but to your point, it's this assumption that you have a problem that can be answered by my product. That's what you really think about is, and I alluded to this earlier, is that if you look at the way buyers go through the process, it's 3 stages. First stage is, what's our problem? It's the what stage, right? What is our problem? What are the outcomes we can achieve by solving this problem? The second stage is, well, how could we solve that problem? How could we achieve these desired outcomes? So we're going to look for alternatives in the market. We're going to see what's out there. This is where you as a seller start influencing the trade-offs the buyers make. The third order decision for buyers is who we're going to buy from. So if you're going into the first interaction with the buyer, the what stage, and you're pitching your product, you're at a parallel path to the buyer. You're not intersecting with where they are.
No, this is great stuff. Very actionable. And I guess anything else that you see out there, big pitfalls that you've noticed in the market?
Well, I think that this is one of my personal ones, is that you have to commit yourself to winning a majority of your qualified opportunities. There's so many companies, especially in the SaaS world, that you think that a 20% win rate out of your most qualified opportunities in your pipeline is acceptable. And if practice makes perfect, the only thing you're practicing is losing. So you have to say, what do I need to do, even if it's on your personal level, on your personal sales process, is what do I have to do to engineer this process so that I can win at least 50% of these most qualified opportunities I have in there. Otherwise, if you're losing them, if you're losing majority of them, what your buyers are telling you, because it's a referendum on you, because what they're saying is, you're just not doing a very good job with helping us understand why this will be of value to us.
That is a really interesting take because yeah, I've heard that over and over again that, 25% close rate is good in the SaaS industry. That's it's acceptable, it's commendable in some companies. And when you flip the
In a word, it's
perspective on
not.
that, yeah, exactly. When you flip the perspective on it, it's like, well, wait a minute, that's 75% of your pipeline is just not, it's just disappearing, evaporating, not closing. What does that mean? Yeah. And oh, that's super interesting. So what are some ways that a rep can kind of take charge of that process in their pipeline and their career and start to measure their close rate and do some things to improve that percentage?
Well, a lot of it comes back to first of all, it's just this connection you build with the buyer. Have you built a connection based on credibility and trust? And the first decision, or the first decision most buyers make is whether they want to invest their time and attention in you in a meaningful way.
If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSURF5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSURF5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf. So, Andy, you mentioned you have a book coming out here pretty soon. Tell us about that book, what it's about, and what can we learn about that?
Yeah, so depending when this episode airs, so we'll probably have just announced that the book is coming. It's coming in February 2022, but obviously hopefully people want to pre-order it before then. So the book is titled Sell Without Selling Out, A Guide to Success on Your Own Terms. And book delves into some of the themes we've talked about in the show here today, which is, look, we have this reputation as sellers with buyers that is, I'll say it's unfair, but not necessarily undeserved. And for our salesy behaviors, and these salesy behaviors have no value to the buyers. They have no value for us really as sellers. So let's just stop doing them. And in its place, and talk about this perspective about what our job as a seller is our job as a seller is to listen, to understand what's the most important thing to the buyers and help them get that. And I contrast the two styles of selling. I call one selling out and one selling in. And what you want to do is you want to sell in. And the 4 pillars of selling in are connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. And
cool.
Go into detail of hugely practical takeaways on all the pillars to help you sell in and help you be the type of buyer that your buyer needs and wants you to be, and reach a level of fulfillment in the job you're doing that you're not going to get selling out. And ultimately, that's what we all want in sales. We want to be consistently successful. We want to become the best version of ourselves that we can. We want to be able to help people. We want to have some degree of financial security. The way to do that is to lean into the human aspects of selling and these things that you have sort of direct control over. And in some cases, as I talk about in the book, is as a seller, it's going to be up to you to sort of grab autonomy in how you sell. Is that, you have to push back from time to time on your bosses that say, maybe you should do it this way or do it that way or do it this way. And early in my career, and I tell the story in the book, is I sort of developed a reputation of listening to bosses and say, why they say, hey, do it this way, and saying, that's interesting. I could do that, but let me think about it. And it's like, finally one boss, sort of threw up their arms in frustration and said, don't you ever just say yes to anything? and the answer was no, because this is my career. No one else cares about my career or cares about your career as much as you do.
Right. That is a hard one. And that's one that I personally struggle with also, is I tend to want to be, I hate to say yes man, or, someone who doesn't want to ruffle feathers. And so I find myself, if a manager gives advice saying, yep, I'm going to go try that, and I'll just go do it, because I don't care to fight you on it. So I'll just go try it, whether it works or not. And I think that's cool that there's, a book about that.
If it doesn't work and you don't hit your number, or you lose a particular deal, who gets fired? Not them, you.
Yeah.
This is your career. You need to assume control over the choices that you make about how you sell. And yes, that may require some difficult conversations. Yes, you still have to be accountable for the results, but there's a much greater chance of you actually succeeding on a consistent basis if you feel good about how you're doing things. If you feel that the way you're selling aligns with who you are as a human being, your values, the way you look at life, the way you approach people. And so, yeah, the bottom line is, as an individual seller, no one cares. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
No one cares as much as you do. And so don't let other people dictate completely how you're going to sell. Yes, you're going to operate within a framework. Yes, you're going to operate within the framework of a process or a playbook, but you have to experiment and say, what's going to work best for me? People ask me, so, what style am I? Am I Sandler or Spin or blah, 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 blah. I'm none of them, and I'm all of them.
Yeah.
Right. I am the sum total of all the experiences I've had in sales that I've learned from, that I decided to apply. And I'm just not one thing. And we're all different. All of us are individuals, much as our buyers are individuals. So this is the other important reason why you need to be the best version of yourself, is that so you don't have these assumptions when you go in to talk to buyers. Oh, I read the persona about this buyer, and I know that this position in this industry, this is the way they're going to, these are things they like and the way they're going to answer these questions. And it's like, maybe they do.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you're talking to a person who's one of 7 or 8 billion individuals in this world who have their own unique perspective and outlook on how things do. You need to be prepared to have a very unique experience with them.
Yeah.
And if you can deliver that, if you can make that connection, if you can show them that you're curious about them, if you can make them feel understood, then you're going to win the deal.
So true. That's awesome. Oh, well, I can't wait for the book to come out. Andy.
The book is, I love this topic so much, I get carried away. Yes, the book is, you can go on Amazon, anywhere. We've got some bonuses for people to some exclusive events we'll have after the book is available, that for people that pre-ordered to come and attend and hear me talk and ask me questions directly, and some other great things that we're doing. So yeah, encourage people to, as I said, go to where you buy books. If you want to come to andypaul.com right now, you can learn about what those bonuses are. And then having learned that, then come back and tell us that you pre-ordered, and we'll get you enrolled for those.
That's excellent. And then where can my listeners check out your podcast?
Wherever you listen to podcasts. So it's Sales Enablement with Andy Paul. But as we said before, I'm not a sales enablement person. It's the title that was given to the show. We do talk about enablement from time to time, but yeah, it's a sales podcast. On November 29th, our 1000th episode is released. And yeah, the special guest for that will actually be somebody who will be interviewing me. So we're going to sort of turn the mic around for that show. And so check out Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to connect with me, please do on LinkedIn, usual preamble stuff and real Andy Paul. And if you search me, I'll probably be the first one to come up there.
And to my listeners, I recommend giving him a follow. I follow his stuff. I love his takes on certain things. I think you're probably posting, is it every day? It seems like I see something in my feed.
Sometimes multiple times a day. Yeah.
Multiple times a day. If you're looking for some quick hits, just to, get your head in the right space before you do some calls or before your next big pitch discovery call or demo, definitely follow Andy. Andy, it's been so great having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and giving us some perspective.
Well, Jesse, thank you very much for having me on. You do a great job.
All right. Take care.